January 1961. Moscow's winter presses against the laboratory windows, frost etching silent patterns on the glass. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of machine oil and ozone, punctuated by the low hum of fluorescent lights. A corridor stretches ahead, sterile, shadowed, lined with heavy steel doors. Behind one, a team of Soviet scientists hunches over a table littered with blueprints and coded memos, their faces drawn and pale in the red glow of an emergency lamp. A distant siren wails, muffled by concrete. The scientists' hands tremble as they pass a folder stamped with the KGB's insignia. Its contents: a breakthrough in missile guidance, the product of years of sleepless nights and silent sacrifices. One man, Dr. Anatoly Sokolov, glances at his colleagues, his eyes searching for reassurance. But there is only fear. Suddenly, a junior technician bursts in, breathless, clutching a crumpled telegram. The message is brief, chilling. Compromise suspected. Security breach. All personnel remain in place. The room falls silent. Outside, footsteps echo. Measured, deliberate, growing louder. In that moment, the scientists realize the unthinkable. Their secrets, once guarded by the iron fist of the KGB, may have slipped through invisible hands. The sense of safety, of certainty, evaporates. All that remains is dread, and the knowledge that the world outside these walls is about to change forever. The late 1950s and early 1960s marked a period of relentless tension and transformation across the globe. The Cold War, a silent war of nerves and secrets, had reached a fever pitch. The world was divided, East and West, communism and capitalism, each side locked in a race for supremacy that stretched from the icy plains of Siberia to the bustling streets of Washington, D.C. In Moscow, the Soviet Union's capital, the air was thick with suspicion and ambition. The launch of Sputnik in October 1957 had stunned the West, proving that Soviet science could leap ahead of American technology. The Kremlin's leaders, led by Nikita Khrushchev, poured resources into their scientific institutions, demanding breakthroughs in rocketry, nuclear physics, and cryptography. Laboratories became fortresses, guarded by armed men and layers of bureaucracy. Every document, every experiment, was classified, marked for the eyes of the trusted few. The KGB, the Soviet Union's formidable security service, watched over these secrets with ruthless efficiency. Its agents moved silently through the corridors of power, monitoring scientists, intercepting communications, and rooting out suspected traitors. Internal protocols were strict. Scientists were vetted, their families scrutinized, their movements tracked. A single misstep could mean exile, imprisonment, or worse. Yet beneath this iron discipline, anxiety simmered. The Americans were not idle. Across the Atlantic, the CIA had launched its own technological offensive, seeking to match and surpass Soviet advances. Spy planes soared over Soviet territory, cameras whirring. Agents slipped across borders, trading cash for secrets. The race was not just for missiles or satellites, it was for the future itself. In the heart of this struggle stood the Soviet scientific community. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to the pursuit of knowledge now found themselves at the center of a global contest. Their work was no longer just about discovery. It was about survival. Every breakthrough was a weapon, every failure a potential disaster. As the 1960s dawned, the stakes grew higher. The Cuban Missile Crisis loomed on the horizon, and the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war. In Moscow's laboratories, the pressure was relentless. The scientists knew that their every move was watched, their every word recorded. But what they did not know, what no one could have imagined, was that the greatest threat to their secrets was not lurking in the shadows of their own government, but waiting across the ocean, armed with deception and cunning. The Central Intelligence Agency, born in the aftermath of World War II, had by the late 1950s become a master of shadows. Its mission: to pierce the Iron Curtain, to learn what the Soviets would kill to protect. In Langley's windowless rooms, analysts pored over intercepted radio chatter, satellite photographs, and the whispered confessions of defectors. But as the Soviets tightened their grip on internal security, the CIA's traditional methods began to falter. A new breed of intelligence officer emerged. Men and women trained not just in surveillance, but in the art of deception. They studied Soviet bureaucracy, learned the language of KGB memos, and practiced the subtle craft of forgery. The agency's Technical Services Division, a clandestine workshop of chemists and engineers, developed inks that mimicked Soviet formulas, paper that matched the weight and texture of KGB stationery, and stamps that could fool even the most vigilant counterintelligence officer. The stakes were enormous. The Soviets' advances in missile guidance and radar threatened to tip the balance of power. American generals demanded answers. How close were the Soviets to fielding a new generation of intercontinental ballistic missiles? What secrets lay hidden in the blueprints locked away in Moscow's research institutes? To answer these questions, the CIA turned to its most audacious plan yet. The idea was simple, but dangerous. Create fake KGB documents, plant them in the path of Soviet scientists, and use the resulting confusion to extract genuine secrets. The operation would require flawless execution. One slip, and the entire network of American assets in Eastern Europe could be exposed. Key figures emerged on both sides. In Washington, CIA officer James W. coordinated the operation, recruiting linguists, forgers, and field agents. In Moscow, KGB Colonel Ivan Petrov led the hunt for foreign spies. His reputation built on a string of successful counterintelligence coups. Between them, a web of double agents, couriers, and informants stretched from Vienna to Berlin, each playing a part in the unfolding drama. As 1961 approached, the plan moved from theory to action. Forged documents were prepared, their contents carefully crafted to sow doubt and misdirection. American operatives slipped across borders, carrying microfilm and coded instructions. Soviet scientists, unaware of the trap, continued their work, never suspecting that the very documents they trusted might be the key to their undoing. The stage was set. The world watched, unaware, as the first moves of a new kind of espionage unfolded in the shadows. The line between truth and deception blurred, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. The revelation struck like a thunderclap. Soviet scientists, men and women who had devoted their lives to the pursuit of knowledge and the defense of their homeland, found themselves at the center of a nightmare. The laboratory, once a sanctuary of intellect and discipline, became a crucible of suspicion and fear. Dr. Anatoly Sokolov, whose hands had shaped the future of Soviet missile guidance, stared at the forged KGB documents in disbelief. The familiar stamps and signatures were there. But something was wrong. A subtle inconsistency in the phrasing, a misplaced comma, a paper texture that felt just slightly off. The emotional toll was immense. Careers built on trust and loyalty now teetered on the edge of ruin. Colleagues eyed each other with suspicion, friendships frayed, and the ever-present fear of the KGB's wrath hung over every conversation. Some scientists withdrew into silence, haunted by the possibility that they had unwittingly aided the enemy. Others raged against the invisible adversary, desperate to understand how their fortress of secrecy had been breached. Meanwhile, in the heart of CIA headquarters, the operation unfolded with clinical precision. The agency's Technical Services Division worked in secrecy, perfecting the art of Soviet forgery. Chemists analyzed samples of KGB ink, engineers reverse-engineered Soviet typewriters, and linguists studied the bureaucratic jargon of Moscow's security apparatus. Every detail mattered. A single error could expose the entire operation. The plan was executed in stages. First, forged documents were slipped into diplomatic pouches and couriered to Vienna, where American agents waited in the shadows. Next, the documents were introduced into Soviet channels, disguised as routine memos or technical updates. The goal was simple: to create confusion, to make Soviet scientists question the authenticity of their own orders, and to open a window for American operatives to extract genuine secrets. At the heart of the operation lay a single prize: the blueprints for a new missile guidance system. This technology, capable of steering intercontinental warheads with unprecedented accuracy, represented the cutting edge of Soviet military science. Its theft would not only tip the balance of power, but also expose the vulnerabilities of the Soviet security apparatus. As the CIA's plan took shape, the tension in Moscow's laboratories grew unbearable. The scientists knew that something was wrong, but they could not see the enemy. All they could do was wait, and hope that the truth would reveal itself before it was too late. In the Kremlin, the news of the breach reached Nikita Khrushchev with chilling speed. The Soviet leader, already beset by the pressures of the arms race and the looming threat of nuclear confrontation, demanded answers. KGB Colonel Ivan Petrov was summoned to a midnight meeting, his reputation on the line. The internal inquiry began with ruthless efficiency. Files were seized, scientists interrogated, and security protocols reviewed. The KGB's first instinct was to search for traitors within, convinced that only an insider could have orchestrated such a devastating leak. The laboratories became battlegrounds of suspicion. Scientists were questioned about their loyalties, their contacts, even their families. Some were placed under surveillance, their movements tracked by plainclothes agents. Careers were destroyed in the search for a scapegoat. The sense of betrayal ran deep, not just among the scientists, but throughout the ranks of Soviet intelligence. The idea that the enemy could have penetrated their defenses using forged documents was almost unthinkable. But as the investigation deepened, a new possibility emerged. Forensic analysis of the compromised documents revealed subtle discrepancies. Chemical traces in the ink, microscopic differences in the paper, linguistic quirks that betrayed a foreign hand. The realization dawned slowly, painfully. The breach was not the work of a traitor, but of an adversary who understood the Soviet system better than many of its own operatives. The moral dimension of the operation cast a long shadow. Espionage had always been a game of deception, but the use of forged documents to manipulate the very guardians of secrecy raised uncomfortable questions. Was there a line that should not be crossed, even in the pursuit of national security? The scientists, caught between loyalty and suspicion, wrestled with the ethics of their own work. The KGB, forced to confront its own vulnerabilities, began to question the limits of its power. In Washington, the CIA celebrated its success, but not without reflection. The operation had exposed the fragility of trust, the ease with which truth could be twisted. For the men and women who had orchestrated the deception, victory was tempered by the knowledge that the game they played had real consequences. Lives ruined, careers ended, and a legacy of paranoia that would linger for decades. As the dust settled, both sides understood that the rules of espionage had changed. The line between friend and foe, truth and falsehood, had blurred beyond recognition. The stage was set for the operation's climax, a confrontation that would redefine the boundaries of secrecy and trust. Vienna, spring 1961. The city, a crossroads of East and West, hummed with the quiet tension of the Cold War. In a dimly lit cafe near the Ringstrasse, CIA officer James W. nursed a cup of bitter coffee, his eyes fixed on the door. Across the street, a Soviet courier known as Victor Z waited in the shadow of a tram stop, a battered briefcase at his feet. The air was thick with anticipation. Every movement, every glance, a potential signal. The operation had been months in the making. American forgers had crafted a set of KGB documents so convincing that even seasoned Soviet operatives would struggle to detect the deception. The papers detailed a new directive, a request for updated missile guidance blueprints to be delivered via diplomatic pouch to a secure drop in Vienna. The plan relied on Victor Z, a trusted courier with a reputation for discretion. Unbeknownst to him, the documents he carried were fakes, designed to trigger a chain reaction within the Soviet scientific establishment. At precisely 10:17 a.m., Victor entered the cafe, his briefcase clutched tightly. James W. nodded, signaling the exchange. The two men spoke briefly, their conversation masked by the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of other patrons. The handoff was smooth, almost unremarkable, a practiced dance in the theater of espionage. Within minutes, the forged documents were on their way to Moscow, embedded among genuine reports and technical memos. Back in Washington, U.S. analysts waited anxiously. The blueprints, once in Soviet hands, would be copied, annotated, and, if the plan worked, eventually returned to Vienna for further review. The CIA's hope was that the Soviets, believing the documents to be authentic, would reveal their own technological secrets in the process of responding to the fabricated directive. The first transfer of stolen blueprints arrived in Langley weeks later, smuggled out of Vienna by a network of American agents. The documents were a treasure trove, detailed schematics, technical notes, and internal memos that shed light on the Soviet Union's most advanced missile guidance systems. The operation was hailed as a triumph, a testament to the power of deception in the age of espionage. But in Moscow, the seeds of doubt had already been sown. Soviet counterintelligence officers, trained to spot the slightest irregularity, began to notice anomalies in the paperwork. A signature that seemed too perfect, a date that didn't match official records, a watermark that faded under scrutiny. The realization was slow, but inevitable. Something was wrong. The hunt for answers had begun, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of both intelligence empires. The alarm spread through Moscow's scientific community like wildfire. Within hours of the first anomalies surfacing, KGB agents descended on research institutes, laboratories, and government offices. Scientists were summoned for questioning, their personal files scrutinized, their homes searched. The Red Scare, once a distant memory, returned with a vengeance. This time, its target was not political dissidents, but the very minds that powered the Soviet Union's technological ambitions. Arrests followed swiftly. Some scientists were detained for days, others for weeks, as interrogators pressed for confessions and explanations. The atmosphere in the laboratories shifted from collaboration to suspicion. Colleagues became potential informants, and every conversation was shadowed by the fear of betrayal. Careers that had taken decades to build were destroyed in a matter of hours. The public, kept in the dark by state media, sensed only the faintest tremors of the crisis. But within the scientific elite, the fallout was devastating. Behind closed doors, the KGB launched a forensic investigation. Decryption experts pored over the compromised documents, searching for hidden codes or foreign signatures. Chemical analysts tested the ink and paper, comparing them to known Soviet standards. The breakthrough came when a microscopic fingerprint, left by an American forger, was discovered on one of the pages. Linguists identified subtle errors in phrasing, clues that pointed to a non-native speaker. The evidence was irrefutable. The documents were forgeries, crafted with extraordinary skill, but ultimately betrayed by the smallest of details. The revelation forced a reckoning within Soviet intelligence. The KGB, long considered infallible, had been outmaneuvered by an adversary who understood not just their technology, but their psychology. The rules of the game had changed. Espionage was no longer a contest of brute force or simple surveillance. It was a battle of wits, where deception could be more powerful than any weapon. For the scientists, the damage was permanent. Some were exonerated, their names cleared after months of investigation. Others never recovered, their reputations tarnished by suspicion. The sense of trust that had once bound the scientific community was shattered, replaced by a lingering paranoia that would haunt Soviet research for years to come. As the dust settled, both sides recognized the irreversible shift. The CIA's success had come at a cost, but it had also redefined the boundaries of espionage. The Soviet Union, wounded but wiser, began to rebuild its defenses, not just against foreign spies, but against the insidious power of doubt and deception. The aftermath of the operation rippled through both superpowers with relentless force. In Washington, the stolen blueprints were quickly integrated into U.S. missile programs. Engineers and analysts pored over the Soviet designs, identifying weaknesses and opportunities for improvement. The intelligence gained from the operation accelerated the development of American guidance systems, narrowing the technological gap that had haunted the Pentagon since Sputnik. For the Soviet Union, the consequences were far more personal. The KGB, under pressure from the Kremlin, launched a sweeping purge of suspected traitors within the scientific community. Dozens of scientists were dismissed, their careers ended by a single accusation. Some were arrested, their fates sealed by secret trials and closed-door interrogations. The number of confiscated documents grew daily, as security officers combed through archives in search of further breaches. The psychological impact was profound. Laboratories that had once thrived on collaboration became fortresses of suspicion. Scientists hesitated to share ideas, fearing that any misstep could be interpreted as treason. The sense of unity that had driven Soviet innovation was replaced by a climate of fear, a legacy that would linger long after the immediate crisis had passed. State media, controlled by the Kremlin, downplayed the incident, framing it as a minor security lapse. But within the halls of power, the truth was clear. The Soviet Union had been outmaneuvered, its most precious secrets stolen by an enemy who understood the value of doubt. The operation became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most secure systems could be undone by a single act of deception. As the Cold War continued, both sides adapted. The CIA refined its techniques, developing new methods of infiltration and forgery. The KGB, chastened by its failure, tightened its protocols and expanded its surveillance. The race for technological supremacy became a race for psychological dominance. A contest not just of machines, but of minds. The scars of the operation remained visible for years. Scientists who had survived the purge carried the weight of suspicion, their reputations forever marked by the shadow of betrayal. The Soviet Union, once confident in its ability to protect its secrets, now faced a future defined by uncertainty and mistrust. In the years that followed, the KGB underwent a profound transformation. The lessons of the forged document scandal were etched into every new protocol, every training manual. Counterintelligence officers were retrained to spot not just traitors, but the subtle fingerprints of foreign deception. Laboratories adopted stricter controls, with multiple layers of verification for every document and communication. The paranoia that had gripped the scientific community became institutionalized, shaping the culture of Soviet research for a generation. Declassified CIA reports, released decades later, revealed the true scope of the operation's success. The intelligence gathered from the stolen blueprints provided a critical edge in the arms race, allowing American engineers to anticipate Soviet advances and counter them with precision. The operation was hailed as a model of ingenuity, a testament to the power of psychological warfare in the age of technology. The impact extended far beyond missile guidance systems. The space race, already a battleground of national pride, became even more intense as both sides sought to outmaneuver each other through espionage and innovation. Soviet scientists, wary of further breaches, adopted new methods of compartmentalization, limiting the flow of information even within their own ranks. American operatives, emboldened by their success, pushed the boundaries of covert operations, developing new tools and techniques for the next generation of intelligence wars. The legacy of the operation was complex. It had exposed the vulnerabilities of even the most secure systems, demonstrating that trust could be weaponized as effectively as any missile or satellite. The scars it left on the Soviet scientific community were deep, shaping the trajectory of research and development for decades. For the CIA, it was a victory tempered by the knowledge that the game of espionage was never truly won, only played, again and again, in the shadows. As the Cold War entered its final decades, the memory of the stolen technology lingered. It served as a warning to both sides. In the world of secrets, nothing is ever truly safe. The boundaries of warfare had shifted, and the contest for supremacy would be fought not just with weapons, but with ideas, deception, and the fragile currency of trust. In the quiet aftermath, the laboratory stands empty. The red emergency light that once cast its glow over blueprints and anxious faces has faded, replaced by the soft hum of modern machinery. Yet the memory lingers, a silent testament to the cost of secrets and the power of deception. For the scientists who lived through the ordeal, the scars are invisible but enduring. Trust, once the foundation of collaboration, became a fragile commodity. The pursuit of knowledge, once a noble calling, was shadowed by suspicion and fear. The legacy of the operation is not just measured in stolen blueprints or technological advances, but in the lives altered by a single act of cunning. History remembers the contest between nations, the race for missiles, satellites, and supremacy. But beneath the headlines, the true story is one of human vulnerability. The forged documents, crafted with such precision, revealed the limits of certainty in a world defined by doubt. They showed that even the most brilliant minds could be undone by the simplest trick, and that the boundaries of warfare extend far beyond the battlefield. In the end, the operation stands as a lesson in humility. Technology can be stolen, secrets can be forged, but the cost is always borne by people, scientists, agents, families, whose lives are shaped by forces they cannot control. The laboratory, once a fortress of innovation, is now a monument to the fragile line between truth and deception. And as the world moves forward, the memory of that winter in Moscow endures, a reminder that in the pursuit of power, the greatest weapon is often the one no one sees.